couldn't believe my ears when I first heard about this nightmare unfolding in a quiet Naperville driveway. The command shattered the silence of that upscale neighborhood. "Get on the ground now!" Handcuffs clicked tight against wrists that had signed landmark rulings just hours earlier. The officer, fueled by adrenaline and raw bias, thought he had caught a car thief red-handed in a $1 million driveway. He figured he was about to make the bust of the month. He was dead wrong. He wasn't arresting some criminal. He was assaulting a sitting state Supreme Court justice. What happens when the man you accuse of stealing a car is the same man who writes the laws you swore to uphold? This is the story of Officer Ryan Matthews and the mistake that cost him everything. Officer Ryan Matthews drummed his fingers on the steering wheel of his patrol cruiser, the leather worn smooth by nervous energy. The clock on the dashboard showed it was late at night in Naperville, a sprawling suburb where the lawns were manicured to the millimeter and the crime rate was so low that a jaywalking ticket counted as a busy week. For Matthews, a 26-year-old with a buzz cut and a chip on his shoulder the size of a cinder block, Naperville felt like purgatory. He had transferred from the inner-city Chicago precinct a while back, chasing a pay raise and a quieter life for his fiancée Megan. But the silence of the suburbs was deafening. He missed the action. He missed the rush. Most of all, he missed feeling like a real police officer, which in Matthews's mind meant hunting bad guys, not rescuing cats from elm trees. "Dispatch, all quiet in Sector 4, he mumbled into the radio, his voice thick with boredom. "Copy," came the crackly reply from dispatcher Carol, who sounded like she was knitting a sweater between calls. Matthews turned his cruiser onto Elmwood Lane. The streetlights here were amber and widely spaced, casting long cinematic shadows across the multi-million-dollar colonials set back from the road. It was a neighborhood of doctors, tech CEOs, and old money. Then he saw it. A silver 1968 Mercedes-Benz 280SL Pagoda, a pristine machine, a ghost from a classic era, gleaming under the streetlights. It was moving slowly, prowling along the curb before signaling a left turn into a long, winding driveway of a massive brick estate. Matthews sat up straighter. He knew cars. That vehicle was worth upwards of $200,000. He also knew the demographics of Naperville. As the Mercedes turned, the amber light caught the profile of the driver, an African-American man, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket. Matthews's mind immediately began to calculate, relying on the aggressive, often flawed intuition he had cultivated back in the city. Late night, expensive vintage car, black driver in an all-white neighborhood, driving slow, looking for a house. Probably a delivery driver who got lost, he whispered to himself, though his gut screamed otherwise. Or maybe a valet taking a joyride. He punched the accelerator. The cruiser surged forward, closing the distance just as the Mercedes crested the top of the driveway. Matthews didn't turn on his lights yet. He wanted to catch him in the act of, well, he wasn't sure what yet, but he was sure something was off. He typed the license plate JDG882 into his onboard computer. The system spun for a second before returning the registration details. Owner, William Whitaker. Vehicle, 1968 Mercedes-Benz. Status, clear. "William Whitaker," Matthews muttered. The name sounded stuffy, old white. He looked up at the driveway. The driver had parked near the garage and was opening the door. Matthews's internal narrative took a sharp, dangerous turn. That guy isn't William Whitaker. That guy stole William Whitaker's keys. In Matthews's limited worldview, the equation didn't balance. He didn't see a homeowner returning after a late dinner. He saw a suspect securing a target. The adrenaline, dormant for months, spiked. This was it. A grand theft auto bust in progress. A chance to show the chief that Ryan Matthews hadn't lost his edge. He flipped the toggle. The light bar on the roof exploded into red and blue strobes, bathing the elegant brick facade of the house in chaotic light. He chirped the siren once, aggressive and loud. Up at the garage, the driver paused. He had one leg out of the low-slung convertible. He looked back at the blinding lights, squinting. He didn't run. He didn't panic. He just stood up slowly, adjusting his suit jacket. To Matthews, this wasn't calmness. It was audacity. Matthews slammed his cruiser into park at the bottom of the driveway, blocking the exit. He unbuckled his seatbelt and shoved the door open, his hand instinctively dropping to rest on the grip of his service weapon, not drawing it, but hovering. "Police!" he shouted, his voice echoing off the surrounding houses. "Stay by the vehicle!" The man stood by the driver's side door. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with graying hair close cropped and a neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard. He wore a tuxedo with the bow tie undone, hanging loose around his neck. He looked at Matthews with an expression of profound, weary confusion. "Is there a problem, officer?" the man asked. His voice was a deep baritone, resonant and controlled, the voice of a man used to being listened to. "I said stay by the vehicle," Matthews barked, marching up the driveway. The incline was steep and he could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. "Let me see your hands. Get them out of your pockets." The man slowly removed his hands from his tuxedo pockets and held them out to his sides, palms open. "My hands are visible, officer. I live here. I'm just getting home." "Yeah, sure you do," Matthews sneered, closing the distance to within 10 feet. He shone his flashlight directly into the man's eyes, blinding him. "And I'm the King of England. Whose car is this?" "It is my car," the man said, shielding his eyes with one hand. "If you lower that light, I can show you my identification. It's in my breast pocket." "Don't you move," Matthews snapped. "Turn around, face the car, hands on the roof, now!" "Officer," the man said, his tone dropping an octave, becoming stern, "you are making a mistake. I am Justice William Whitaker. This is my residence. You are trespassing on private property without probable cause." Matthews laughed, a sharp, incredulous bark. "Justice, huh? What, like a superhero? Turn around." Matthews was committed now. The cognitive dissonance was too strong. He couldn't reconcile the man before him with the name on the registration. In his mind, William Whitaker was an old white guy playing golf. This man, calm, defiant, black, had to be a liar. And Officer Ryan Matthews hated liars. He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I've got a 1032 in progress. Suspect is uncooperative. Possible 1099 involving a stolen luxury vehicle. Send backup." The man by the car sighed, a sound of heavy resignation. "You are not listening, son. This is going to go very badly for you." "Don't call me son," Matthews spat, stepping into the man's personal space. "Face the car." The neighborhood was waking up. The strobe lights from Matthews's cruiser reflected off the windows of the houses across the street. Porch lights flickered on. A few curious neighbors stepped out in their bathrobes, peering into the darkness to see what was happening at the Whitaker estate. Justice William Whitaker placed his hands on the cold canvas roof of his Mercedes. He felt the humiliating grit of the fabric against his palms. He had spent 30 years in the legal system. He had started as a public defender in Chicago, worked his way up to the district attorney's office, served as a superior court judge, and had been appointed to the state Supreme Court a few years ago. He was the first African American to hold the seat in the state's history. He knew the law better than the young man breathing heavily behind him. He knew the Fourth Amendment. He knew Terry versus Ohio. He knew that Officer Matthews had no reasonable suspicion to stop him other than the color of his skin and the car he was driving. But he also knew something else. Arguing with a panicked cop in a driveway at midnight was a good way to get shot. "Spread your legs," Matthews commanded, kicking Whitaker's ankles apart roughly. Whitaker winced but complied. "Officer, my wallet is in my inner left jacket pocket. My judicial identification is in there. Please check it." "I'll check what I want to check," Matthews said, patting him down aggressively. He felt for weapons, his hands moving with rough practice speed. He found nothing but a fountain pen and a heavy leather wallet. Matthews yanked the wallet out. He didn't open it immediately. He was too focused on maintaining dominance. "So, William," Matthews said, mocking the name, "where did you swipe the keys? Valet stand at the Ritz, or did you break into the house while the owners were on vacation?" "Open the wallet," Whitaker said calmly. Matthews ignored him. He grabbed Whitaker's left wrist and twisted it behind his back. "You're under arrest for suspicion of grand theft auto and resisting an officer." "I am not resisting," Whitaker stated clearly, speaking not just to Matthews, but to the imaginary jury he knew might one day review this footage. "I am complying fully. You are hurting my shoulder. I have a torn rotator cuff." "Should have thought of that before you stole a car," Matthews grunted. He snapped the first cuff onto Whitaker's wrist. The metal bit into the skin. At the bottom of the driveway, a second cruiser screeched to a halt, then a third. Doors slammed. Two more officers, Tom Harris and Steve Novak, ran up the driveway, hands on their holsters. They were older, veterans of the Naperville force. "Ryan, what have you got?" Harris yelled, breathless. "Subject was driving a vehicle registered to William Whitaker." Matthews shouted back, struggling to pull Whitaker's other arm back. Whitaker wasn't fighting, but his broad frame made it difficult for the smaller Matthews to get leverage. Claimed he lived here, refused to ID, resisting arrest. Harris slowed down as he approached the garage lights. He squinted at the man pinned against the Mercedes. Harris had worked in Naperville for 15 years. He knew the residents. He knew the cars. He stopped dead in his tracks. "Ryan," Harris said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Ryan, stop!" "I got him!" Matthews yelled, fueled by the presence of an audience. He yanked Whitaker's right arm back and clicked the second cuff. "Got him! You have the right to remain silent." "Ryan, you idiot! Stop talking!" Harris shouted, stepping forward. Matthews froze, looking back at his colleague. "What? He's the perp?" Harris looked at the man in cuffs. The man turned his head slightly, locking eyes with Harris. "Hello, Sergeant Harris," Whitaker said. His voice was icy. Harris's face went pale. He recognized the voice. He recognized the face. He had testified in front of this man 3 months ago in a high-profile suppression hearing. "Justice Whitaker," Harris stammered. "Sir, I'm sure there's a misunderstanding." Matthews looked between Harris and Whitaker. A small, cold worm of doubt began to wriggle in his stomach. "Justice?" Matthews asked. "What are you talking about? His ID says—" Matthews finally looked down at the wallet in his hand. He flipped it open. There was no driver's license in the window. Instead, there was a gold badge recessed into the leather. Below it, a laminated card read, "State Supreme Court of Illinois Justice William T. Whitaker." Matthews stared at the badge. The gold seemed to glare back at him. The silence that followed was heavier than the car next to them. "Uncuff him!" Harris hissed, lunging forward. "Ryan, get the cuffs off him right now!" But the damage was done. The mechanism of the law had been engaged, and reversing it wasn't as simple as turning a key. Whitaker straightened up, his shoulders pinned back awkwardly by the steel restraints. He looked at Matthews with a gaze that could strip paint off a wall. "Do not remove these handcuffs," Whitaker said, his voice dangerously low. Harris froze. Matthews's hands were shaking. "Sir?" Harris asked. "You arrested me," Whitaker said, his eyes fixed on Matthews. "You claimed I stole my own car. You claimed I resisted. You have deprived me of my liberty. If you take these off now, you are covering up a crime. You will process me. You will book me, and we will see exactly how far this goes." "Sir, please," Harris begged. "Rookie mistake. He's new. He didn't know." "Ignorance of the law is no excuse," Whitaker quoted, the words landing like hammer blows. "Isn't that what you tell the boys in the street, Officer Matthews?" Matthews couldn't speak. His throat was dry as sand. The bust of the month was rapidly turning into the end of his life. "Take me to the station," Whitaker commanded, "and read me my rights properly this time. You missed the part about the right to an attorney." Matthews stood there, the wallet trembling in his hand. The neighbors were watching, the backup officers were watching, and Justice William Whitaker, the man who held the power to destroy him with a single phone call, was waiting for a ride to jail. Matthews swallowed hard. He had wanted a twist. He had wanted drama. He had just arrested the state Supreme Court justice. The ride to the precinct felt like an eternity. The interior of the patrol car, usually his sanctuary of authority, had transformed into a claustrophobic confession booth. In the back seat, separated by the plexiglass partition and the wire mesh, Justice William Whitaker sat in silence. He didn't scream, didn't kick the door, and didn't plead. He simply stared out the window at the passing suburbia, his silhouette dark and unreadable against the flashing streetlights. Matthews's hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. Every time he glanced in the rearview mirror, he saw the justice's eyes, calm, calculating, terrifying. "Dispatch en route to station with 1 male in custody," Matthews radioed. His voice wavered, lacking the swagger he had displayed in the driveway. "Copy charge?" Carol asked. Matthews hesitated. The radio was an open channel. Everyone was listening. If he said grand theft auto, he was locking himself into a lie he knew was false. If he said nothing, he looked incompetent. "Processing for investigation," Matthews stammered. "Copy." Behind him, Whitaker spoke. It was soft, but it cut through the hum of the engine. "You didn't read me my Miranda rights, Officer Matthews." "I know," Matthews said, his throat tight. "I'll do it at the station." "Procedural error number 2, Whitaker noted as if dictating a memo to a clerk. "Keep counting." When they rolled into the secure sally port of the Naperville precinct, the atmosphere was already heavy. Sergeant Harris had called ahead. The garage door rumbled shut behind them, sealing them in concrete. Matthews stepped out, his legs feeling like jelly. He opened the back door. Whitaker swung his legs out, moving with a dignity that the handcuffs should have stripped away but somehow only amplified. Waiting by the intake door was Lieutenant Frank Dawson, the shift commander. Dawson was a mountain of a man with a red face and a mustache that looked like a push broom. He looked like he was about to have a stroke. "Ryan," Dawson growled, ignoring the prisoner for a moment. "What did you do?" "He resisted," Matthews said, his defensive walls slamming into place. He couldn't back down now. If he backed down, he admitted fault. If he admitted fault, he was fired. He wouldn't ID. He was combative. Dawson looked at Whitaker. He saw the tuxedo. He saw the face he had seen in the newspapers and on the nightly news during the Supreme Court confirmation hearings. Dawson closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Justice Whitaker," Dawson said, his voice strained. "I'm Lieutenant Dawson. I apologize for the confusion. If we can just take the cuffs off, we can go to my office, have some coffee, and sort this out." "No coffee," Whitaker said coldly. "Process me." Dawson blinked. "Sir, your officer arrested me," Whitaker said, raising his cuffed wrists. "He accused me of a felony. He brought me in. Now finish the job. Book me, fingerprint me, take my mugshot, put me in the system." "Sir, that's not necessary," Dawson pleaded. "We can release you, Your Honor." "I am not accepting a release," Whitaker interrupted, his voice booming in the concrete garage. "If I were a 19-year-old boy from the South Side driving that car, would you be offering me coffee? Would you be apologizing, or would I already be in a cage?" Silence stretched across the garage. The other officers processing a drunk driver in the corner stopped to watch. "You profiled me," Whitaker continued, locking eyes with Matthews. "You assumed criminality based on optics. Now you will follow the procedure you use for everyone else. I want my record to show exactly what happened tonight. Book me." Dawson looked at Matthews with pure venom. "You heard the justice. Get him to booking. And Ryan, don't you dare mess up the paperwork." The booking process was a surreal theater of the absurd. Usually, booking was a dehumanizing assembly line where the suspect was stripped of identity and reduced to a number. But here, the power dynamic was inverted. The booking officer, a kindly woman named Officer Rachel Brooks, was shaking as she took Whitaker's fingers and pressed them onto the glass scanner. "I'm so sorry, sir," she whispered. "Just doing your job, officer," Whitaker said kindly. "Make sure the print is clear. I don't want a retake." Then came the mugshot. Whitaker stood against the height chart. He didn't slouch. He didn't look away. He stared directly into the lens, his expression fierce and unyielding. The flash popped. Click. That image, Justice William Whitaker in a tuxedo, disheveled but unbroken, was captured. Whitaker knew exactly what that photo would do when it leaked. It was a weapon. "Take his property," Matthews said, trying to regain some semblance of control. He held out a plastic bag. Whitaker emptied his pockets. The wallet, the fountain pen, a handkerchief. "Shoelaces and belt," Matthews ordered, reciting the script. "Suicide risk." Dawson, watching from the doorway, looked like he wanted to strangle Matthews. "Ryan, seriously." "Standard procedure, Lieutenant," Matthews said, his jaw set. "You want me to treat him special?" Whitaker smiled, a thin, dangerous smile. "He's right, Lieutenant. Rules are rules." Whitaker removed his expensive leather belt and slid the silk laces from his patent leather shoes. He handed them to Matthews. "There," Whitaker said. "I'm now a prisoner of the state. Take me to my cell." The holding cell at the Naperville station was designed for temporary storage. Drunks to sober up, domestic disputes to cool down. It smelled of industrial disinfectant and stale urine. Matthews unlocked the heavy steel door and swung it open. Whitaker stepped inside. The door slammed shut with a finality that usually signaled the end of a man's freedom. For Whitaker, it signaled the beginning of the war. There was one other occupant in the cell, a young man, barely 20, huddled in the corner on the metal bench. He was wearing a faded hoodie and jeans. He looked up, eyes wide, as the older man in the tuxedo walked in. Whitaker sat on the opposite end of the bench. He adjusted his jacket, smoothing the lapels. "Rough night?" Whitaker asked the kid. The boy blinked, surprised by the voice. "Yeah, I guess." "What did they get you for?" "Loitering," the kid muttered, picking at a loose thread on his jeans. "I was waiting for the bus after my shift at the diner. Cops said I looked like I was casing the pharmacy across the street." Whitaker nodded slowly. "And did you have a receipt from the diner? A uniform?" "Yeah," the boy said, frustration rising in his voice. "Showed him my apron, showed him the bus schedule. Didn't matter. He said I had an attitude. Name? Whitaker asked. Darius. Well, Darius, Whitaker said, leaning back against the cinderblock wall. My name is William, and I think tonight is going to be a very interesting night for justice in this town. Meanwhile, in the bullpen, the atmosphere was toxic. Matthews sat at his desk, staring at the blank incident report on his screen. The cursor blinked, taunting him. Subject observed driving suspiciously. No, that sounded weak. Subject refused to comply with lawful orders. Better. Subject reached for waistband. Don't even think about it. A voice hissed in his ear. Matthews jumped. It was Lieutenant Dawson. Don't you dare write a word of fiction in that report, Dawson whispered, leaning in close so the other officers wouldn't hear. That man in there isn't some drug dealer you can pin a drop gun on. He's a state Supreme Court justice. Every word you type is going to be dissected by the best lawyers in the country. He stole the car, Matthews whispered back, desperate. Or I thought he did. He didn't show ID. He was in his own driveway. Dawson snapped. You trespassed, you profiled, and now you've dragged the whole department into the mud. You better pray the dashcam footage is ambiguous, Ryan, because if it shows you acting like a cowboy, I will personally strip that badge off your chest. Dawson stormed off toward his office. Matthews looked around. The other officers, Harris, Novak, the rookies, were all avoiding eye contact. The blue wall was crumbling. He was radioactive. Back in the cell, Whitaker stood up and walked to the bars. Officer, he called out. The jailer, a stout man named Peterson, hurried over. Yes, Justice, can I get you something? Water? A blanket? I am entitled to one phone call, Whitaker said. I haven't made it yet. Of course, Peterson fumbled with his keys, opening the cell door. Come with me to the booking desk. You can use the line there. Whitaker walked out, leaving Darius staring in awe. At the desk, Whitaker picked up the receiver. Matthews watched from his computer, straining to hear. Was he calling a lawyer? His wife? Whitaker dialed a number from memory. It wasn't a local number. It was a direct line to the state capitol. He waited for 3 rings. A groggy voice answered on the other end. Yeah, who is this? Governor, Whitaker said, his voice calm and authoritative. I apologize for waking you. Matthews stopped typing. The room went dead silent. William. The voice on the other end became instantly alert. William, it's the middle of the night. Is everything all right? Is it the appeals case? No, Richard, Whitaker said. I'm calling you from the Naperville Police Department holding cell. I've been arrested. You've been what? The governor's shout was audible even without speakerphone. Grand theft auto, Whitaker said dryly. Apparently I stole my own car. The arresting officer, a Mr. Ryan Matthews, found my presence in my own driveway to be suspicious. I'm currently shoeless and beltless in a cage with a young man named Darius, who was arrested for waiting for a bus. William, I'm calling the commissioner right now. I'll have you out in 10 minutes. No, Whitaker said sharply. You will do no such thing. Excuse me? I do not want to be released, Richard. I want to be arraigned. I want to go before a judge tomorrow morning. I want this officer to stand in open court and explain why he arrested me. I want the system to work exactly as it is designed to work. William, this is political suicide for the mayor of Naperville. This is a media circus. It is a necessary lesson, Whitaker said. Call the district attorney. Tell her to be at the arraignment. And Richard, tell her not to offer me a plea deal. I want a trial. Whitaker hung up the phone. He turned to look at Matthews. The young officer's face was the color of old ash. You might want to call your union rep, Officer Matthews, Whitaker said softly. I think you're going to need him. The next morning, the news had broken. A leaked mugshot of State Supreme Court Justice William Whitaker, looking defiant in a tuxedo, was trending on Twitter. The hashtag Justice for the Justice was already viral. Reporters had surrounded the Naperville courthouse, their satellite trucks clogging the streets. Inside the courthouse, the air was vibrating with tension. Ryan Matthews sat in the front row of the courtroom gallery, dressed in his dress uniform. He looked exhausted. He hadn't slept. He had spent the night trying to construct a narrative that made sense, but every time he replayed the events in his head, he saw the trap closing. His union representative, a slick lawyer named Mike Davidson, sat next to him. Just stick to the report, Davidson whispered. Reasonable suspicion, dark conditions, uncooperative subject, officer safety. Say those 4 phrases over and over again. But he's a judge, Mike, Matthews whispered, his voice trembling. Doesn't matter if he's the Pope, Davidson said. If he didn't ID, you have a right to detain. We can spin this. Just don't crumble." "All rise!" the bailiff shouted. Judge Harold Kensington swept into the room. Kensington was an old-school judge known for being harsh on crime and friendly to police. Matthews felt a flicker of hope. Kensington might have his back. The clerk announced the docket: State versus William T. Whitaker. Charges: grand theft auto, resisting arrest, obstruction of justice. The side door opened. Whitaker was led in, still wearing his tuxedo, though it was wrinkled now. He was in handcuffs, shackled at the ankles. The sound of the chains dragging across the floor silenced the room. Usually, high-profile defendants were allowed to come in via a side entrance, unshackled. But Whitaker had insisted. He wanted the visual. He wanted the world to see the state Supreme Court justice in chains. He took his place at the defense table. He had no lawyer. He stood alone. The prosecutor was District Attorney Emily Carter herself. She looked like she wanted to be anywhere else on earth. She stood up, her hands shaking slightly. "Your Honor," Carter began, "the state moves to dismiss all—" "Objection!" Whitaker boomed. Judge Kensington looked down over his spectacles, bewildered. "Mr. Whitaker, excuse me, Justice Whitaker, you are objecting to the dismissal of charges against you." "I am, Your Honor," Whitaker said. "I have been accused of a felony. A police officer swore under oath that I committed a crime. If the charges are dismissed now, the public will say it is because of who I am. I want the probable cause hearing to proceed. I want the officer to testify." The courtroom gasped. The reporters in the back row began furiously typing on their phones. Kensington rubbed his temples. He looked at the DA. He looked at Matthews. He looked at Whitaker. He knew Whitaker. They had clashed on legal interpretations for years. He knew Whitaker was setting a trap, but Kensington couldn't see the mechanism yet. "Very well," Kensington said. "The state will present its evidence for probable cause. Ms. Carter?" Carter looked at Matthews. She had no choice. "The state calls Officer Ryan Matthews." Matthews stood up. His legs felt heavy, like they were filled with lead. He walked to the witness stand, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. He sat down. The microphone hummed. "Officer Matthews," Carter said, trying to keep her voice neutral, "please tell the court why you initiated a stop of the defendant." Matthews took a breath. He looked at the empty jury box. This was just a hearing. And then at Whitaker. Whitaker was staring at him with a look of absolute terrifying patience. "I was on patrol in Sector 4, Matthews recited, his voice cracking slightly. "I observed a vehicle, a vintage Mercedes, driving erratically." "Erratically," Whitaker spoke up from the defense table. "Objection, vague." "Sustained," Kensington said. "Be specific, officer." "It was moving very slowly," Matthews corrected. "It looked like it was prowling. It turned into a driveway. I ran the plate. It came back to William Whitaker." "And what did you do then?" Carter asked. "I approached the driver. I suspected the vehicle might be stolen because of the time of night and the high value of the car." "Did you identify yourself?" "Yes, I shouted police. I ordered the suspect to stay by the car. He refused to show me his hands initially." "Liar," Whitaker said softly, but the microphone caught it. "Justice Whitaker, you will have your turn," Kensington warned, though he looked intrigued. "He refused to identify himself," Matthews continued, gaining a little confidence. "He was belligerent. He started reaching into his pockets after I told him not to. I feared for my safety. That's why I detained him." "So, in your professional opinion," Carter asked, clearly reading from a list of required questions, "you had probable cause to believe a theft was in progress?" "Yes, ma'am," Matthews said. "He didn't fit the profile of the homeowner." "Thank you, officer." Carter sat down. "Justice Whitaker," Kensington said, "do you wish to cross-examine?" Whitaker stood up. He didn't use the podium. He walked toward the witness stand, the ankle chains rattling. He looked like a vengeful spirit. "Officer Matthews," Whitaker said. His voice was smooth, the voice of a man who had dominated courtrooms for 30 years. "You stated I was driving erratically. Is driving under the speed limit a crime in Naperville?" "No, but it's suspicious," Matthews said. "You stated I refused to show my hands. Officer, does your patrol car have a dashboard camera?" Matthews froze. "Yes." "And does it have a microphone?" "Yes." "And were those devices active last night?" "Yes." Whitaker turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I would like to enter into Evidence Defense Exhibit A, the dash cam footage from Officer Matthews's cruiser, which I had subpoenaed earlier this morning." Matthews's heart stopped. He looked at his union lawyer, who had gone pale. "Play it," Kensington ordered. A large screen dropped down. The video began to play. The courtroom watched the grainy footage. They saw the Mercedes turn slowly. They saw the cruiser lurch forward aggressively. They heard the audio clearly. "Probably a delivery driver lost or a valet taking a joyride," the gallery murmured. Bias, pure and simple. Then the stop. "Let me see your hands. Get them out of your pockets." "My hands are visible, officer. I live here." "Pause," Whitaker commanded. The video froze. "Officer Matthews," Whitaker said, pointing at the screen. "Are my hands in my pockets in that frame?" Matthews stared at the screen. Whitaker's hands were clearly out, palms open at his sides. "No," Matthews whispered. "So you lied to the court just now when you said I refused to show my hands." "I misremembered." "Play," Whitaker said. The video continued. "Yeah, sure you do. And I'm the King of England. Whose car is this?" "It is my car. My identification is in my breast pocket." "Don't you move. Turn around." Whitaker stopped the tape again. "I told you where my ID was," Whitaker said, his voice rising in volume. "I told you who I was. Did I at any point raise my voice? Did I use profanity? Did I threaten you?" "No," Matthews said, his voice barely audible. "Then explain to this court," Whitaker roared, slamming his hand on the railing of the witness stand and making Matthews flinch, "why you felt it necessary to twist the arm of a 60-year-old man, kick his legs apart, and place him in handcuffs when the only crime he committed was parking in his own driveway while black." "I was following procedure," Matthews stammered, tears forming in his eyes. "No, Officer Matthews," Whitaker said, leaning in close. "You were following your prejudice. You saw a black face in an expensive car, and you decided the only explanation was crime. You didn't investigate. You assaulted." Whitaker turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the defense rests regarding the cross-examination, but I have one more motion." "And what is that?" Kensington asked. He looked furious. He looked like he wanted to throw Matthews in a cell himself. "I move that the charges against me be dismissed with prejudice," Whitaker said, "and I move that the transcript of this hearing and this video evidence be immediately forwarded to the State Attorney General's office for the consideration of charges against Officer Matthews for perjury, filing a false police report, and deprivation of civil rights under color of law." The courtroom erupted. The gavel banged. Matthews sat in the witness chair, realizing that the cage he had built for Whitaker was now closing around him. The walk from the witness stand to the exit of the courtroom was less than 50 feet. But for Ryan Matthews, it felt like a march across a minefield. He didn't look at the gallery, but he could feel the eyes, the reporters, the activists, the fellow officers who had shown up to support him but were now averting their gazes, studying their shoelaces. The blue wall of silence hadn't just cracked. It had evaporated the moment the dashcam footage played. Matthews wasn't a hero being persecuted by a woke system anymore. He was a liability. He was a liar who had been caught on tape perjuring himself to frame a state Supreme Court justice. As he pushed through the heavy oak doors, the noise hit him. Camera flashes popped like strobes. Microphones were shoved into his face, forming a bouquet of black foam and plastic. "Officer Matthews, did you know he was a judge? Officer Matthews, why did you lie about the hands? Officer Matthews, are you going to resign?" His union lawyer, Davidson, shoved a path through the mob. "No comment! Move! Move!" They reached Davidson's car. Matthews collapsed into the passenger seat, his uniform suddenly feeling like a costume made of lead. He pulled his phone out. 47 missed calls, 112 text messages. The first text was from Megan. "Don't come to the apartment. My sister's picking me up. I can't do this, Ryan. Everyone is watching." Matthews stared at the screen. The air left his lungs. Megan was his anchor. She was the reason he had moved to the suburbs. She was the reason he wanted the safe shifts. "Drive," Matthews rasped. "We have to go to the station," Davidson said, starting the engine. "The chief wants your badge and gun immediately. It's an administrative suspension pending investigation, but let's be real. You're done." The ride to the precinct was silent. When they arrived, Matthews wasn't allowed to enter through the back door like a cop. He had to wait in the lobby while Davidson went in to get the paperwork. Lieutenant Dawson came out 5 minutes later. He was holding a plastic bin. "Put it in," Dawson said. He didn't look angry anymore. He just looked disgusted. Matthews unholstered his Glock 19. He ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, and placed the weapon in the bin. He unpinned his badge, number 492, and dropped it on top of the gun. The metallic clack sounded like a gavel. "You're barred from the premises," Dawson said. If you need personal effects from your locker, give me a list. Do not come back here. Lou, Matthews started, his voice cracking. I thought I was doing the right thing. That's the problem, Ryan, Dawson said, turning his back. You actually believe that? The karma didn't hit all at once. It came in waves, eroding the shoreline of his life until there was nothing left to stand on. That night, Matthews slept in a cheap motel off the interstate because Megan had changed the locks. He lay on the lumpy mattress watching the local news. They were playing the dashcam footage on a loop. And I'm the King of England. The news anchor, a woman with a sharp judgmental tone, was interviewing a legal analyst. This is a textbook case of deprivation of rights, the analyst said. The Justice Department is already involved. Officer Matthews isn't just looking at losing his job. He's looking at federal charges. Title 18, U.S. Code, Section 242, up to 10 years in federal prison. Matthews threw the remote at the TV. It shattered the screen, spiderwebbing the image of his own face. A couple of days later, the indictment dropped. It wasn't just a slap on the wrist. The district attorney, humiliated by the hearing and eager to prove she wasn't protecting bad cops, threw the book at him. State of Illinois versus Ryan Matthews. Count 1, perjury, Class 3 felony. Count 2, official misconduct, Class 3 felony. Count 3, aggravated assault, Class A misdemeanor. Count 4, unlawful detention, Class 4 felony. Matthews was arrested at the motel. This time, there was no professional courtesy. The officers who came for him were from the Internal Affairs Division. They were cold, efficient, and rough. Turn around, the lead detective barked. Matthews complied. He felt the cold steel of the handcuffs click onto his wrists, the same sound he had inflicted on Justice Whitaker. Too tight? The detective asked mockingly. It's fine, Matthews grunted. They walked him out to the car. The neighbors in the motel complex, truckers, transients, people down on their luck, watched from the balconies. Look at that, one of them shouted. Pig in a blanket. Matthews was driven to the county jail, not the suburban station, but the massive concrete fortress in the city, the same jail where he had sent dozens of men. Processing was a nightmare. He was stripped of his clothes. He was made to squat and cough. He was showered with cold water and delousing powder. He was given an orange jumpsuit that smelled of sweat and mildew. When they took his mugshot, the photographer didn't say sorry like the woman had said to Whitaker. Chin up, dirtbag, the photographer said. Flash! Matthews was placed in protective custody because putting a cop in general population was a death sentence. But protective custody was its own kind of hell. Solitary confinement, 23 hours a day in a 6x8 cell. He sat on the bunk, staring at the concrete wall. He thought about the Mercedes. He thought about the delivery driver comment. He thought about the power he used to feel when he put on the uniform. Now, he was just inmate 894. Oh, and the man he had tried to break was sleeping in a mansion, preparing to destroy him in court. The trial of Ryan Matthews took place several months later. It was the spectacle of the year. The courtroom was packed. This time, Matthews sat at the defense table. He wasn't in uniform. He wore a cheap suit his mother had bought him from a department store. He looked smaller, thinner. The swagger was gone, replaced by a permanent flinch. Justice William Whitaker was the star witness for the prosecution. When Whitaker took the stand, the jury sat up straighter. He didn't wear his judicial robes. He wore a sharp navy suit. He spoke with the precision of a surgeon. Mr. Whitaker, the prosecutor asked, how did Officer Matthews's actions affect you? Whitaker looked directly at Matthews. His eyes weren't angry. They were filled with a terrifying pity. It was not the physical handcuffs that damaged me, Whitaker said, his voice resonating in the quiet room. It was the assumption that my existence in my own home was a crime. Mr. Matthews didn't see a judge. He didn't see a citizen. He saw a stereotype. And because of that blindness, he felt justified in stripping away my constitutional rights. If he could do that to a Supreme Court justice, imagine what he has done to people who have no voice. Imagine what he did to the young man, Darius, who was in the cell with me. The jury looked at Matthews. They didn't see a protector. They saw a bully who had picked the wrong fight. Matthews's defense was weak. I made a mistake in the heat of the moment. I was scared. But the dashcam footage played again and again didn't show fear. It showed arrogance. The deliberation took 4 hours. When the jury returned, Matthews stood up, his knees knocking together. He looked at Megan, who was sitting in the back row. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at her hands. We, the jury, find the defendant, Ryan Matthews, guilty on count 1, perjury. Guilty on count 2, official misconduct. Guilty on count 4, unlawful detention. Matthews closed his eyes. Tears leaked out, hot and shameful. Judge Kensington, the same judge who had presided over the initial hearing, looked down at Matthews. Ryan Matthews, Kensington said, you betrayed the badge. You betrayed the public trust. You used the law as a weapon to enforce your own biases. There is no greater crime for a police officer. The sentence, 7 years in state prison. The gavel banged. It sounded like the final nail in a coffin. Years later, the visitation room at the State Correctional Center was loud and smelled of floor wax. Ryan Matthews sat on a metal stool. He was 30 years old now, but he looked 40. His hair was thinning. He had a scar above his left eye from a fight in the yard during his first month, a welcome from the other inmates. He was waiting for his mother. She was the only one who visited. Megan had married a dentist 6 months after the trial. But today it wasn't his mother who walked through the door. It was William Whitaker. Matthews froze. He started to stand up, panic flaring, but the guard put a hand on his shoulder. Sit down, Matthews. Whitaker sat on the other side of the glass. He looked older, too. He had retired from the bench the year before. Why are you here? Matthews asked, his voice rough from disuse. I wanted to see you, Whitaker said. I wanted to see if the system worked. Matthews laughed, a bitter, dry sound. It worked all right. I'm here. My life is over. You won. You happy? I didn't win, Whitaker said quietly. Nobody won. You lost your freedom. I lost my faith in the uniform. The city lost a police officer who could have been good if he hadn't been blinded by hate. Whitaker reached into his briefcase and pulled out a book. He slid it through the document slot. It was a legal textbook, Constitutional Law, Principles and Liberties. What is this? Matthews asked. You have plenty of time left, Whitaker said. You can spend it feeling sorry for yourself, getting into fights and rotting. Or you can learn. Learn what? I can't be a cop again. No, you can't, Whitaker agreed. But there are a lot of men in here who need help with their appeals. Men who were put here by officers who did exactly what you did, but didn't get caught on camera. You know how the police lie. You know how the reports are fudged. You could be useful. Matthews stared at the book. You want me to help criminals? I want you to help justice, Whitaker said, standing up. It's the only way you'll ever balance the scales, Ryan. You owe a debt. Start paying it. Whitaker turned and walked away. Matthews sat there for a long time. He looked at the heavy textbook. He looked at his scarred hands. Finally, he opened the book to page 1. The story of Ryan Matthews serves as a brutal reminder. Justice is not just a concept. It is a boomerang. When you throw it with malice, it will return to strike you down. Matthews thought he was the law, but he learned the hard way that the law is bigger than any badge. He profiled a man based on the color of his skin and the car he drove, never suspecting that the suspect was the very architect of the laws he was breaking. It is a tragedy of hubris, a young man with potential ruined by his own prejudice, a system that protects its own until the evidence is too damning to ignore, and a judge who turned his own victimization into a lesson for the world. So the next time you see power being abused, remember Officer Matthews. Remember that the person you judge today might be the one holding the gavel tomorrow. Wow, that was intense. I want to know what you guys think. Did Officer Ryan Matthews deserve 7 years, or was the system too harsh on him? And what about Justice William Whitaker? Did he do the right thing by visiting him in prison? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of heavy drama and instant karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. We drop new twists every week. As I sat there reflecting on the whole heartbreaking saga of Officer Ryan Matthews and Justice William Whitaker, one truth hit me harder than anything else. Life has a way of turning the tables when we least expect it, and prejudice doesn't just wound the person it targets. It eventually destroys the one who carries it. Imagine being so certain of your own righteousness that you handcuff a man in his own driveway, convinced he's a criminal simply because his skin doesn't match the picture in your head. Ryan thought he was protecting the neighborhood, enforcing the law, being the hero. But in that single moment of blind assumption, he didn't just violate another human being's rights, he shattered his own future, his career, his relationship, his dignity. He lost everything he thought the badge gave him. And the saddest part? He never saw it coming because hate had already blinded him long before the red and blue lights flashed. And then there's Justice Whitaker, calm, composed, powerful in his restraint. He could have walked away with a quiet phone call and a hushed apology. Instead, he chose to stay in those cuffs, to let the system chew on its own flaws, to make sure the world witnessed what happens when bias wears a uniform. He turned personal humiliation into a public lesson, not out of revenge, but out of a deep, aching belief that justice should never bend for anyone, not even for him. The real gut punch is this: every one of us carries little judgments we don't even notice until they cost us something irreplaceable. A quick assumption about a stranger, a snap decision based on appearance, a moment we convince ourselves this is just how things are. But those moments aren't harmless. They ripple, they wound, and sometimes they come back to break us. So I ask you from the bottom of my heart, pause before you judge. Look deeper, listen harder, because the person you're ready to write off might be carrying more wisdom, more pain, more authority than you'll ever know. And the weight of your prejudice might be the very thing that eventually crushes you. What about you? Have you ever caught yourself making a snap judgment that changed how you see the world? Or has a moment of unfair treatment taught you something you'll never forget? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and these conversations mean everything to me. If this story moved you, hit that like button to help spread the message, and please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next real-life lesson wrapped in raw emotion. We're in this together. Let's keep choosing empathy over assumption. See you in the next one.